The morning mist hung low over the streets of Newport, Rhode Island as Elizabeth Carter guided her Range Rover through the historic Naval District. The early autumn air carried the briny scent of the harbor, and the first rays of sunlight pierced through the fog, casting long shadows across the colonial buildings lining the waterfront. Elizabeth's life was a testament to precision and success. Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I have something special planned just for you. At 52, Elizabeth had built her wealth management firm, Carter Capital, from the ground up. She turned it into one of the most respected boutique firms in New England, the corner office overlooking the Newport Bridge, the vacation home on Martha's Vineyard, and the designer wardrobe in her walk-in closet weren't just possessions, they were milestones of a life shaped by determination and hard work. Her morning were as carefully planned as her investment strategies. Every Wednesday began with a 7 a.m. Pilates class at her exclusive health club, followed by a meeting with her senior team at Harbor View Cafe, a chic waterfront spot frequented by Newport's elite. Today, as she drove through the historic district, Elizabeth allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. Quarterly reports had exceeded expectations, and she just secured a deal that would expand her firm's presence in Boston's competitive market. Her phone buzzed with notifications, clients seeking advice, colleagues congratulating her latest market analysis, and friends trying to secure her presence at upcoming charity galas. The familiar weight of her Cartier watch pressed against her wrist as she glanced at the time. She was early, something that pleased her immensely. To Elizabeth, being early wasn't just a habit, it was a mark of control, and control was a cornerstone of her life. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, her tailored navy Chanel suit pressed to perfection, and her demeanor exuded the confidence of someone who had never met a problem she couldn't solve. As she pulled into the cafe's parking lot, Elizabeth's eyes landed on a spot close to the entrance, marked with a familiar sign reserved for military veterans. Elizabeth respected the military. Her late father had served in Vietnam, after all, but she often wondered why veterans needed special parking privileges in civilian spaces. The lot was mostly empty at this hour, and she reasoned that no one would need the spot this early. She maneuvered her Range Rover into the space, adjusting it with precision, and stepped out, her litten heels clicking against the pavement as she walked toward the CAF entrance. The faint smell of espresso mingled with the salty breeze, reminding her why she chosen Newport as her base of operations. Its mix of historic charm and modern affluence mirrored her own carefully cultivated image. Little did Elizabeth know that her decision to dismiss the parking sign was about to set off a chain of events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about success, respect, and strength. Inside, Elizabeth settled into her usual corner table, arranging her iPad and leather portfolio with precision. She ordered her standard oat milk latte and began reviewing market reports. The cafe buzzed with quiet energy. Analysts in crisp suits whispered about trends, while executives held informal breakfast meetings. This was her domain, a world where influence was measured in portfolios and profit margins. Through the window, she noticed a man paw near her Range Rover. He was tall, probably in his late 40s, wearing a simple black jacket and jeans. Something about his bearing caught her attention. His movements were deliberate, his stance commanding without being ostentatious. At first, Elizabeth tried to ignore him, focusing on her report, but her gaze kept drifting back. The man was inspecting the reserved for military veterans sign and her car with unwavering focus. Then he pulled out his phone and began taking photos. Annoyance flared in her chest. Who did he think he was? Her instinct was to let it go. Her team would arrive soon for their meeting, and this was hardly worth her attention. Yet something about the man's calm, purposeful demeanor unsettled her. Rising from her chair, Elizabeth straightened her jacket and walked toward the door, heels clicking with authority, she approached him, her polished confidence on full display. "Excuse me, is there a problem?" she asked. "That's my car you're photographing." The man turned, his expression neutral but sharp. Up close, Elizabeth noticed the weathered lines of his face, the intensity in his eyes. "Yes, ma'am, there is," he said, his voice steadier. "Parked in a space reserved for veterans." Elizabeth felt her irritation spike. "I'm aware of the sign," she replied, gesturing toward it. "I'll only be here for an hour. And the lot is mostly empty. Surely this isn't an issue." His eyes didn't waver. "It's not about convenience," he said calmly. "These spaces are reserved out of respect for those who served. It's about what they represent." His composure only fueled her frustration. "Look, I respect the military," she said, her tone firm. "My father served in Vietnam, but there are plenty of other spaces available. Let's be practical." The man's gaze hardened slightly, though his voice remained calm. "Respect isn't about practicality, it's about principle. When people disregard these spaces, they're saying that principle doesn't matter." Elizabeth's chest tightened. The conversation had escalated in a way she hadn't anticipated. Through the cafe's window, she noticed her team assembling, glancing curiously in her direction. Her perfectly choreographed morning was unraveling. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice tinged with exasperation. "Why do you care so much about this one spot?" "I'm Commander Jason Hart," he said, "retired Navy SEAL. I served 20 years, including multiple combat deployments. These spaces may seem insignificant, but a recognition of sacrifice, a reminder of the cost of the freedoms we all enjoy." The weight of his words landed heavily on Elizabeth. She'd been arguing with a Navy SEAL, someone who had spent decades risking his life while she built her empire. She glanced at her watch. Her meeting was overdue to start, but for once time didn't seem to matter. "I didn't know," she said, her voice quieter now, "but surely you can see that this is an overreaction." Commander Hart shook his head. "Respect isn't something you compromise, it's given freely or not at all." Elizabeth stood in silence, feeling the carefully constructed walls of her authority begin to crack. For the first time in years, she felt unsure. Exposed through the cafe window, she saw her untouched latte on the table, but the once important meeting felt inconsequential. Finally, she exhaled and reached into her bag for her keys. "You're right," she said, "I'll move my car." Commander Hart nodded, stepping aside. "Thank you. It's not about the parking space, it's about recognizing what it stands for." As Elizabeth parked several rows back and walked toward the cafe, she realized this encounter was about more than a reserved spot. It was about values she had overlooked, truths she had avoided. Inside, the latte was cold, and her team had rescheduled the meeting, but none of it mattered today. She had learned a lesson in respect, one that no business deal or quarterly report could teach. Tomorrow brings new opportunities for growth and understanding. Subscribe to hear more stories that challenge and inspire, and let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.